Thank you all for being here. It's my honor and a pleasure to introduce to you the recipients of this year's AECT ETRD Distinguished Development Award. So this year, actually, it's special because we have a team of scholars who received this award. So the awardees, Dr. Mishwa here from Arizona State University. Here is the plaque. And Dr. Kurt Bonk from Indiana University. And then we here on the Zoom, we have Dr. Chris Didi from Harvard University. And we also have Dr. Yang Zhao from University of Kansas. And I guess he's not on the Zoom.
He's not. He's in the air. He's in the air.
Right.
He's flying.
So, okay. So the awardees, they will talk about their work, but briefly, they started this weekly webcasts in March 2020. And they've been doing this weekly. And the conversations are about the future of learning. And the conversations are every Saturday live on YouTube. And they are archived at the Silver Lining for Learning website. And they've involved scholars, educators, students, educational leaders across the globe. And the topics have ranged, widely, and they've just really been getting a lot of people involved in the conversations. So I'll pass the floor to our awardees.
I'll say a brief something real quick before Punya takes over. So I want to thank the people in the audience live today who've come back for a second session. Many of you were at the first session. I want to thank our viewers, including Bob Nelson, I see who's here. Thank you, Bob, and other loyal listeners or watchers, viewers of Silver Lining for Learning. I also want to thank my friends and colleagues and former students all around the world who might be, I don't see every one of you here, but I know several of you told me that you're going to attend. I want to encourage you, though, after this session, to try and download some of our shows, watch some of our shows, listen, and share with your friends and colleagues and spread the news. I've been real fortunate to work with Chris at Harvard, with Yang Zhao, who's also at the University of Melbourne, in addition to the University of Kansas. So Chris Didi's out east, Yang Zhao is living in Oregon, out west, Punya's in Tempe, Punya Mishra at Arizona State University, and then myself in the Midwest. So we've got the entire country covered, but we have the entire world covered with the episodes, even Antarctica twice. So do take a look and take a listen, and we'd love to hear your feedbacks. And I have a couple gifts for people in the audience already who've showed up. Gia, I have something for you, and Sangwan, thank you very much for coming and joining us today. So thank you. And everyone else in the audience already got one. So Punya, you want to take over?
All right, sir. Thank you, Kurt. Let me see if I can. All right, so this way we can also see some of the people who are on there. Hopefully it doesn't cover too much of the slides and should be good. All right, so no, I wasn't getting the slides to move. So again, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for this award. It's very appreciated. So just take you back in time to February 2020 when we first heard of this thing called COVID. In fact, my family was supposed to be here in Vegas because my sister-in-law was visiting from India and we had to cancel everything. And when it started, just a couple of countries had their schools shut down, and within 2 months, almost the entire globe, so which was almost like 194 countries, 1.6 billion learners in this sort of unprecedented global social educational experiment. And on March 11th of that year, we got an email, a bunch of us got an email from this guy, Yang Zhao, who sadly cannot make it here. And I actually blame him for the fact that COVID has lasted as long as it did, because in this email I said, what if schools were closed for more than a year? Is this an opportunity to have some conversation about the future of learning? I sort of rolled my eyes and I'm like, 6 weeks, that's all it's going to take. And yeah, well, here we are, right? And this was the original sort of suspects who started this. So absolutely have to mention Scott McLeod and Chong'e Chen, who are at Colorado, Denver, and East China Normal, respectively. They sort of stepped back from it due to other responsibilities, and we sort of just kept running with it. And so if you, I'm trained as a graphic designer, so I do all the graphics for the site and the editing of the videos and all that. And so you can see that when we first started, it had a very dull and gray and foreboding kind of a sense to it. Even if you hear the title, this is what it sounded like. So it had this sort of ominous dark tone, and you can see our initial episodes, when we talked to Nicoletta and Tommaso in Italy, Italy had just come out. If you remember, if you put your mind back, Italy had got hit really hard. And so these people are talking about what they had just gone through. Similarly, China, Israel, and so on. And so our initial episodes were really focusing on COVID and its implications for education. We had people talking about like remote learning, emergency learning, all of that. But as the episodes kept happening and we got more and more people involved, we started seeing a sort of a shift in our focus. And I think I really give credit to Chris for this, for when we were first thinking about what we should call this series. He said we should call it Silver Lining rather than, what was the thing you came up with yesterday? Pandemic ponderings, which would have a narrow shelf life, so to speak, right? And so, so we sort of rebranded. So the imagery changes, and you can see the. So you can see a change in mood, because I think that's what we were seeing. What we were seeing was in these amazing guests that we are getting on, that they were providing us visions, they were providing us a sense of leadership and optimism and hope and design about how we can think about education differently. So over time, as of last Saturday, we have had 126 episodes, plus there have been side conversations of guests have written blog posts for us. There was a graphic design student in India who started doing, like listening to our episodes and doing these visual maps and then sharing them with us, which was amazing. So we've had over 180 guests with over 30,000. This, I think, number is dated. And visitors from across the globe on coming to the website, coming to the YouTube channel and so on. I think it's important to emphasize that all of this was done with absolutely zero funding. So this is what I call, people call it a passion project. I think I personally call it a curiosity project. Like as an educator, it's given me a chance to engage, communicate, spend time with these four guys every Saturday for the last 2.5 years, which is strange.
Hanging out big trip.
Yeah, I know, very strange. And then this guy started running, and he's been running every day. It's all bizarre. And I just wanted to make a graphic which captured the variety of topics and shows that we have had here. This is the first 100 episodes, right? And topics have been everything from student autonomy, remote learning, and now I do see this is getting covered, that's okay. Novel learning organizations, pioneering curricula, on and on and on. It's an amazing list of people, students, educational leaders, software developers, innovators that we have had a chance to talk to. And what we're going to do today is each of us is going to talk a little bit about 3 or 4 of our favorite episodes, okay? And we're going to start with that. And so Kurt is going to go first. And I think then it's Chris, and then I will do both Young Zhao's as well as my episodes. And then we will end with sort of what we have learned from this, and what are some takeaways, and hopefully some opportunities for all of you to participate. Namely, give us money. That's the bottom line.
That's why we're here.
That's right. Yeah, we are bad salespeople, as you can tell, because 2.5 years.
We still don't have funding. Yeah.
That's what we have, right?
But more importantly, we got some recognition from Linlin, and I want to thank Linlin for that. So, I will.
ETRD.
All right,
Not
Kurt,
from me.
you're on.
Yeah, thanks to ETRD again, for the recognitions. It's not for the recognition that we do it, but it definitely does help keep the persistence and the passion going, both intrinsic as well as extrinsic things we all need as human beings. I will say, on the day we started the show, I went running. I was in Portland, Oregon. I went running in my son's neighborhood. Then that was a Saturday. We were running mostly on Saturdays. And the next day I decided to go running up Mount Tabor in Portland. And the next day I flew home to Indiana and they had a quarantine. Governor Holcomb said, well, you'll be inside from now on. I said, well, for 10 days, I can go running outside. Well, 20 days, 30 days, still running. Today was day 949. And so I'm certifiably crazy hanging out with all these guys and running every day. But you have my calendar project. Those of you got some copies from me. I want to make
that was the only way he could survive this every month in a week meeting.
Yes.
Drove me to drink, drove him to run. So, that's
both for me. So I want to make a connection to AECT, and that is Barbara Lockheed's big project called the Legends and Legacies Project. And in many ways, Silver Lining for Learning is similar to that and extends that. And so if you're thinking about Silver Lining for Learning and using it in your graduate courses or your undergraduate courses, you should also think about utilizing the Legends and Legacies videos, which in fact I'm doing in several of my classes at Indiana University now. We'll talk about pedagogy at the end. We have a couple slides related to how to implement these videos within your classrooms. I see Kinchuk is here. I gave a talk to North Texas people a year ago about just that. So people are seeing podcasts, webcasts, all these video YouTube channels and thinking about how to utilize them. In fact, next month, I'll do a session for Contact North in Canada about how to utilize these respective online open educational resources, we call them. So you can see I guess I'm seeing the next slide. So you can see some of the folks there like, David Merrill and, my friend Marcy Driscoll and Michael Spector, introducing Robert Gagne and my good friend Tom Reeves, who may or may not be watching right now. He is. Hi to Tom. Thank you, Tom, for watching. I'm sorry you can't be here to gamble with us. Of course, we're not gambling, but and Richard Mayer and so forth and so on. So, Richard Dick Cornell, who passed away this past year, all these people are available through Legends and Legacy videos. So all the history of the field being told by the experts, the people who founded it. And in some ways, Silver Lining for Learning shows some up and coming people, as well as the established people, as well as the Legends and Legacies. But it has we have a lot of people who you may have never heard about before, but are doing wonderful things in their communities, in their countries, in their provinces, in the regions of the world. And so we've had, in fact, the current president of AECT, David Wiley, on the show on open educational resources, coming to us from where he was in West Virginia that day. And we had Susie Grances, who's in the audience, talking about UDL. Thank you, Susie, for appearing here today. And Brian Beatty, who's at the conference, is going to show up at the happy hour at 4, and everyone's invited to Blue Moon for happy hour. He'll be down there talking about high flex model of instruction. He's an alum of our program. Everyone has Brian's picture on their dartboards because they hate high flex or they love high flex. And then we had, as you can see here, we had Araz, who's in the audience too, right in the front row, coming to us from Turkey, as well as other colleagues who helped create the EDUCAUSE Horizons report last year. So we had a reflection. We've had UNESCO people, we've had World Bank, Sesame Street. We've had really interesting people on the show every single week. Including, we had folks from Cornell talking about how to turn a local project into a global MOOC for change in the environment, getting kids involved in STEM research and environmental cleanups and all sorts of things. So that was an interesting episode that we had. We had people from the Bahamas and from parts of Africa and from the US talk about how to create a global systemic project related to that environmental or STEM issues. We've also had my friend Cassandra Brooks talking about her research. And if you've read My World is Open book, she's one of the opening chapters of that book talking about her studies of the Antarctic toothfish or the krill down in Antarctica and getting her broadcasts out to schools around the world and having kids ask her questions at night, late at night while she's on the boat in Antarctica, talking about her outreach education. She's now a professor at the University of Colorado at Boulder. And so she's fascinating, along with a second Antarctica researcher who had NSF funding, Jean Pennycook, who some people might recognize because she's internationally known. She's dealing with hundreds of schools around the world, curriculum training about the Adelie penguin and other things happening down in Antarctica. So another fascinating show, kind of like adventure learning, which you may have heard about. And then we also had shows on leadership, such as my colleagues who were at AECT in Indianapolis in 2016, in Sung Jung, who was at International Christian University, who's now retired to Korea. Mei Feng Liu from Beijing Normal University, and Okwa Lee from Chungbuk National, talking about how they grew within the field and giving advice to future leaders, especially female leaders. And that was a fascinating show as well. We had another show where we had kids come in on Halloween. Punya was dressed in a wig. On Halloween, probably freaked everybody out in that show. We had like 6 kids talking about how they were utilizing MOOCs to learn English initially and get certificates from the US consulate and get certificates from Harvard and Stanford for English to prepare them for college. But when that was before the pandemic. When the pandemic hit, then they spread to other regions and sharing with other kids how to utilize MOOCs for many things: paleontology, Egyptian history, finance, you name it. They were taking sociology, psychology. Some kids took more than 100 MOOCs. And that's my current research project, interviewing these teenagers about their notions of self-directed learning and their incentives for utilizing these online and open resources for their education. That is one of the most optimistic shows. It was also a bit, I would say, we had a lot going on there because every kid had something to say. Yeah. And we try to rotate between their advisors and the teachers coming from the US Embassy or coming from the high school, Bayman and Bishwak, as you see their pictures here. Fascinating show. And this, if I had to recommend any show, you should watch this one just because you can see there's hope for the world. Despite the climate issues that we're all dealing with and whatever else, the maturity of the answers of these teenagers would blow my graduate students out of the water, literally sometimes. I mean, it was just fascinating. So we're going to present on this project tomorrow morning, if you're interested, like at 8:30 or 8 o'clock or something like that. I think that's my last slide. Yep. And we're going to move on to Chris Deedy, who will be talking about my good friend, Paul Kim at Stanford.
Okay,
Chris.
Someone's going to advance the slides for me, right? When I say next slide?
Yeah.
So next slide. It feels good to give Punya orders. Not easy thing to do. So I chose 3 early episodes because in many ways, the early episodes set the tone for what followed. And it was valuable for us to have the guidance of these early episodes. So episode 8 was with Paul Kim, who some of you may know. His signature is working with marginalized populations within global South countries. So the human beings on Earth who have the smallest amount of resources in order to help them learn. And he's been very creative over his career in coming up with things. And the show he talked about setting up Raspberry Pi servers that cost less than $40, and that with their disk drive held a huge amount of curriculum, so that it was the Wi-Fi server, the internet server, the database that students could learn from, and so on. I remember earlier in his career, he developed, for places with a lot of electricity, he developed a jump rope. And you could jump rope for a while, and then the handles got a charge when you jumped rope, so you could get a little education. And then when it ran down, you could jump some more rope. So combining the body and the mind in an interesting way. Paul talked about asking great questions, that the curriculum should be about asking great questions. And he has criteria for great questions that involve active learning and critical thinking and metacognition and agency. So there's a rubric for these on a scale of 1 to 5. And literally millions of kids have sent questions into this AI system that Paul has to evaluate whether they're a 1, a 2, a 3, or 4, and a 5, and why. And if kids ask great questions, then you don't have to worry about curriculum, because it all comes out in a much richer and interdisciplinary way than the curriculum is set up. And that highlights a theme that has been part of Silver Lining for Learning throughout, which is that we don't tend to think about roles. You're going to be an engineer, you're going to be a scientist, you're going to be a manager. We think about suites of skills, because in a world with a global digital economy where people are going to have 5 to 7 careers rather than a single job, we need to prepare them with skills that move across careers, like asking great questions. And overall, I think that the emphasis in this episode that helped us to think about this is you can do better things or you can do things better. And we wanted the show to be about doing better things rather than doing things better. Next slide. So this was another early show, a very powerful show. If you were going to watch just one, this is one that I would recommend. And it's on writers, fan fiction writers, kids who hate to write in school, but they will go on to a fan fiction site and write all sorts of stuff all night. And if you step back from this is a form of making. This is a form of peer-based informal communities where learning involves making, whether it's fan fiction, whether it's maker spaces, whether it's hackathons, whatever it happens to be, the making and the sharing are really important. There was a lot of talk about passion-driven learning here. And one of the shifts in higher education that I've championed is not choosing a major, but coming in declaring a passion. So my younger daughter just graduated as a mechanical engineer. I think that's great. Her goal is to improve the conditions of the lives of marginalized people in the global South. And you get a different education if you say, I want to be college to prepare me for that, my passion, than if you say, I'm going to fit into the box of a mechanical engineer. So this whole business about informal communities of active learning and making is about that kind of a shift to passions. One of the two speakers, Cecilia, talked about how at age 10, she read the entire Lord of the Rings trilogy. I can tell you that on audiobook, that is about 54 hours listening. So it's not a small thing for somebody 10 years old to do. And then she started rewriting it because she was dismayed by how male-centric it was. At age 10, fabulous. Another thing that came out in this episode was inclusion. They talked about kids who had sent fan mail to Tim Burton. And they said, I love The Nightmare Before Christmas. It was the first time I saw myself in a film. And we really, need to get beyond the stereotypes about who people are that fuel a lot of our entertainment into the richness of human diversity. So this is a great episode. Next slide. The other one that I want to highlight is a little later, but it was about a theme that has been important to us, and that is that you don't need a lot of money to do very powerful things with learners. And we were dismayed by all the people in the developed world who had tremendous amounts of resources, relatively speaking, and who were wringing their hands and saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't do the other thing. And we go out to some of these transformative heroes highlighted in Silver Lining for Learning, and with far fewer resources, they're doing far better education. And it's just kind of sickening, to watch that difference. Tokes helped me to put this program together. Tokes is a former student and has now co-taught courses with me. So she's a wonderful leader. Judith is coming to Harvard as a fellow next spring to talk about her work with VR in Africa. And the final theme that I want to highlight, and this episode illustrates it, is getting beyond deficit models. So often people identify a population that they want to help, and they start with a deficit model. These people are poor, these people are ignorant, these people are broken, we're going to come in and fix them. Not so. Often people who have been marginalized by society have many more strengths in their dispositions and many more survival skills than people of privilege who've just had everything handed to them. So the concept that there shouldn't be any remediation, everything should be enrichment, which is something Linda Darling Hammond espouses, among others, means that you focus on people's strengths rather than their weaknesses, and you personalize to provide them with the supports that they need. And using advanced technologies like VR in Africa is a way of saying you matter just as much as rich kids in developed countries. Your capacity building is important to us, and we're going to make sure that you get the same kinds of enrichment that others do. So it's been humbling and it's been inspiring to listen to these champions and to recognize a strength of the program, which is these are people, by and large, who have never written a scholarly article, have never been to an EdTech conference. They're off the radar, and yet they're doing, in many ways, better things than most of the scholarly articles, frankly, including those from Harvard, by the way, and most of the EdTech conferences. So it's just been an inspiration for me. So I'm going to toss it to Punya. You're muted.
Thank you, Chris, for letting me know. I would guess that after 2.5 years of a pandemic, I would know how to unmute myself. But anyway, so these examples, for those who didn't catch it online, are Yang Zhao's examples you would have shared if you weren't on an airplane right now. The first one is with Stephen Harris, which is around this project called Learn Life Barcelona, and is the first worldwide network of learning hubs, which, and there are 3 that they've created in Barcelona. There is the urban hub, which is in Barcelona itself, in the center of Barcelona, full-time programs for teenagers. There's the Learn Life Nature Hub, which is in the beaches and the forests, where students engage with nature in a different way. And the remote hub, which I think was growing because of the pandemic partly, was that. But the idea there is through personal purpose-based learning. And one of the things you'll see each one of us, the examples that we give speak to things that resonate more with each of us. So, Kurt's examples are ones that stand out for him. Chris's, if you notice, spoke, had a certain thematic content. And Zhao, I think in our show, has been sort of the strongest voice for learner autonomy and agency, that much of school has become driven by adults, grown-ups' interests, what they think is useful to kids. And so you'll see his examples sort of tend to focus on this idea of personal learning that driven by personal interests and collaboration and so on. And so in this one, what is interesting is the use of architecture or space to design opportunities for students to engage with each other, as well as with nature and in the world in new ways. This was another example, which was student voices sort of similar to the Nepal one. This was really exciting because the kids in this really had, again, you'll see that Zhao theme emerge, right? Which is that they had taken on these passion projects whether that they had to do with oceanography or whatever that topic that was interest to them. And they had a context and a setup where they were actually allowed to do that. And I think in some ways the pandemic, because they were not going to classes, the teachers had to give them a little more freedom, actually allowed them to pursue their own interests in ways that they wouldn't have otherwise. The third example, and this is one which I think sort of segues into the kinds of examples I'm going to talk about a little bit, is this Global Online Academy. So this is a consortium of schools from different parts of the world, and it supports teachers so that you can take a class in a school somewhere else altogether, either remote or mostly remote, partly, and then there is credit transfer. Right? So this is now starting to think about the kinds of systems that we need to build if we have to allow for personalized learning, because if a student in Arizona is interested in oceanography, the chances that there is a teacher in that classroom who knows or understands that is going to be slim. And they can go and take a class with some school in Hawaii, but the problem is their time and effort is not recognized, credit transfer is not, so how do we build systems? So this online global academy is trying to build a system where you can have this kind of transfer of credit happen, where students can take classes in other places. Now you can imagine all the issues that happen here, right, that come up, which have to do with what's the quality like. Every school thinks that we are doing it the best way it can be. Who are they to, right? I mean, those are the kinds of tensions that are there. And I think what this global online academy allows you to do is to have that vetting process that they would say, yes, this is indeed a class which is valuable or quality and so on, right? Coming to my examples, I have two themes that I want to talk about. So I alluded to one already. I'm increasingly, like as I look at the work that I do now, becoming sensitive to issues of systems and culture as driving or constraining a lot of the innovation that we do, right? So this is Sean Lesher. He's actually a graduate of our EDD program, won AERA Best Action Research Dissertation Award. And if you listen to him speak, he speaks like a philosopher. I mean, he's one of the few people I know who speaks in complete paragraphs. It's like thoughts are all set, like designed in his head, and they just come out beautifully. At the same time, he's an amazing active leader within the school. And so this was one of our early episodes. And he talked about how when California shut down schools and, on Friday, they were the only school district, the San Diego school that he used to lead. It was it's this interesting mix of private-public partnership. They were open on Monday, and what comes out very strongly in this episode is the critical role that your sort of the values that you bring to the work that you do as an educational leader, that how you develop and build a culture within the organization. So one of the things that they really emphasized, and I think, Chris, you have mentioned this in a couple of times, which is there were lots of districts which said, okay, how can we reach whoever we can reach? Let's forget the ones who are falling through the cracks because this is emergency remote. Sean was very clear that in his school, in his system, that the first question was who are falling through the cracks. We need to reach them first. So are you a second language learner? Do you have special needs? How do we get to you first? Because the others, they're doing okay. They're not doing great, but those are the ones who are most at risk. So that aspect of values, I think, was really important. Then this is an example from India. Kiran Sethi runs the school in Ahmedabad, just an amazing school. She's trained actually as a designer, and she talked about the story of how when her kid was in school, like first or second grade, and the teacher asked for his roll number and didn't remember his name, she just took him out of school and decided, I'm going to create my own school. And now the school exists, and it's an amazing school. And she is a globally renowned sort of person in terms of, you can just look her up in terms of the work that she does to bring children and agency. But again, it requires a lot of collaboration and understanding of the systems and so on to be able to build that. Akash Sethi runs an organization called Quest Alliance. They are actually related to each other. I think he got inspired to get into education because his aunt was in education. And he works with the school to work pipeline, which is in India is a huge challenge in terms of skill development and so on, because schools are not doing that. And again, thinking of how do we design systems and processes that allow for that to happen, right? And without those systems and processes, you can have the best of intentions, nothing is going to happen. This is sort of self-serving to a certain extent in the sense of speaking to work that is happening at our College of Education at Arizona State University. But this is incredibly inspiring because this is saying that the role of the teacher, that the way we have traditionally defined it, is inherently unsustainable. We are expecting one person to be everything to 30 kids in a classroom, and if you go global south, it might be even larger number of kids. And saying that, can we think of this as a design problem and think of, instead of surrounding 30 kids or giving one teacher a 30 kid model, can we think of an array of adults who are offering services to a wider number of children? The ratio still stays the same, but now you are seeing different ways of deploying adults. I mean, the model, that analogy I would give, if you go to the hospital, there's a nurse who comes in whose specialty is, putting the needle in. Somebody else who comes in who does an expert in this, one doctor who does anesthesia. Now, you could have a model where one doctor, one patient or something like that, but no, that's not how the medical system works. It respects this distributed expertise. But in schools, we don't provide that. And all of us who have been parents know this, right? When the biggest fear is like, oh my God, who's my kid getting for as a teacher today? Because you know you're going to be having that teacher for the rest of the year, as opposed to an array of adults who can respond differentially depending on the personalized needs of the children. So this is a huge initiative out of a college. Brent Madden leads the, so you can go look this up. Really proud of the work that we've been doing right now. The Mesa School District, which I think is the largest school district in Arizona, has promised that within the next 3 years, 50% of the students will have team-based models of teaching. And this model is spreading quite widely. So this was, I think, the theme of systems and design, which I think really resonates with me. But I also want to talk a little bit about another theme, which is sort of prevalent, I think, in all of our, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but it speaks to this idea of play and self-directed learning and creativity. And so we had a few episodes sort of back to back, I think summer of 21, where it was just amazing, with Pasi Sahlberg, and this episode with Peter Gray. And Peter Gray is interesting because he's actually trained as an evolutionary biologist and evolutionary psychologist. And so he brings his ideas of thinking about learning from that background. And the point he makes is that we have evolved to learn through play. And what we have done in school is we have at the most given it 25 minutes in a day, right? And that and it is disconnected to learning. It is in fact escape from learning. And so, and then Bria Bloom, amazing person, she designed her own undergraduate program. So I don't know which college let her do that, but she did. And she now works as an advocate for providing opportunity for students to do that. So this, again, this theme of creativity and play and thinking in terms of systems is what I think really stands out for me. Kurt, you are on for a couple of slides, which I have no idea what you're going to talk about.
I don't either.
I
An
know.
alternate. I think it's sit here.
No, you
Okay.
need to be the audience.
Oh, it's speaker. So you can see that everybody has their own favorites in terms of shows, which is a good sign, because that means this is a strong program. If we all pick the same show, or if we had 4 shows, there's just every show has something of value depending upon your context and what kind of students you're working with and what your goals are and so forth. Everyone is. But I've been fascinated to just sit in and listen to some of the people I had never heard of before, or had heard of but not be able to contact or work with or meet at a conference. But Chris was able to bring them in, and Punya's been able to bring them in, or Young's been able to invite them and so forth, or jointly. Some of the shows are joint shows, I should point out. Some of the shows that that we went through were co-hosted by a couple of us. So we take different approaches. We have a booking. We actually have a booking up in Dropbox, in Google Docs. So we're booked through mid-January right now. If you got some recommendations for shows for the spring semester, or send them to us. If there's someone you've not seen that you think is vital, that's a colleague of yours that you'd like to see appear, please do let us know who that person is. You also can see from here that we have our own networks, and because of the strength of networks, we've been able to tap into that. Chris was someone, as I've embarrassed Chris before many times, he's someone I read about in graduate school. He's a fellow Milwaukeean like me, so I was intrigued by his evolutionary path, because it's been sort of similar to mine, but it's extremely different in many ways. But the people that Chris is linked to in just 2 connections or 1 connection is amazing. And then we have Young Zhao flying over the continent right now, but he knows thousands of people below him. He's up in the air right now. So that the networks, the areas of interest of us are varied, but somewhat similar in nature. And we've been able to put forth thematic shows, as Punya mentioned, the one on creativity in particular that we've had. But we've had stuff on the Global South as kind of a theme as well, or shows on the Global South. And so we enjoy each other, as you can see here. And we take various screenshots, and over time, this is a recent show that we had, show number 80, I guess about half a year ago or so ago. After
almost exactly a year ago.
A year ago, after 2.5 years, we're still enjoying every week. And we're bringing people in that want to appear on the show. I mean, we don't get many no's, and if we do, it's delayed because they just want to make it timed with a report they might be working on, or timed with something else that they can maybe invite someone, a colleague, to join them in a show. Some shows are single person we bring in, but most shows are 2 or 3 people, sometimes 4, 5, or 6. And I think this was an anniversary show that we had.
So this was I think our 100th show.
Yeah.
And what we did, but we have a very solid, dedicated core set of viewers, and we reached out to them and we asked them to join us. And it was amazing. And I think Bob Nelson is on here right now, and you can see him on screen. Lydia, Gerald, Priyank from India, Duncan, all joined us for this episode. And that was actually a lovely episode because we had I hadn't seen many of these people. They'll just chat. I know their names and I know what they type in the chat on YouTube. So it was great for them to join us.
So actually, we got Lydia online in the chat. Thank you, Lydia. We've got Dante online in the chat.
Oh, awesome.
We've got Gerald and we've got Robert. So we've got 4 of our loyal listeners and more. I want to thank all of you who are watching right now. Elaine, who's done a couple of books with me, and other people. So yeah, as you can see, we want to. Priyank is there too. Yeah.
Right.
So we want to turn this into a pedagogical resource, not just a one-off show that we can listen to, but how can we encourage other instructors? We have to go right there. Yeah. And so we want to encourage other instructors because this is open. These resources are not, they're copylefted. We want to make them available for you all to use in some way, shape, or form. Talk to us about how you're using them, if you are using them. I know professors in the University of Maryland, some other campuses. I see Hee Jung Kim in the chat at William Patterson University in New Jersey. She's used them in the past, and I know she's a loyal listener as well. So, I've come up with dozens of ways that I'm using them, and I have them as an optional assignment in my class where they might write reflection papers. They might write to one of the the guests that we've had and ask for updates since the episode was held. Some might write trend papers based on our episodes. Some might remix the episodes together, little snippets from each one to try and create little themes on the episodes. Sometimes I embed them in the online discussion that I have in Canvas, and we do some role play. We might role play some of the guests, or they might take on some kind of procedural roles, if you will. Some students categorize and rank them. I've had a couple of projects. We were hopeful that my students would categorize them well enough that we could actually utilize it. But it's a big task now after 126 shows to try and catalog or tag. But if there's someone out there right now we'd love to get your insights on how we could tag these. Where Punya will talk a bit about how we might get them into podcast format. So some might interview the prior participants. Some might write a Wikibook chapters. I've done several Wikibooks where every student writes a chapter based on something of value, maybe not necessarily in here, but I've done that in the past. So those are some of the ideas that I've come up with. And here's an example, a prompt in one of my syllabi that I gave to my students last semester. Silver Lining for Learning. Each Saturday we feature people or a project related to the field of ed tech that offers not all are ed tech, by the way, that offers a ray of hope during the COVID-19 pandemic. Those selecting this option should watch at least 5 Silver Lining episodes. If you select this option, you will write a 4 or 5 page reflection paper, 2,000, 3,000 words of the insights, concerns, commonalities, disagreements, suggestions, trends, experiences, projects, and technology mentioned by these leaders. That's just one example of a task that I've included within my class. And they like it. I mean, I like reading. I actually enjoy reading when they do pick this option. I think Punya's going to jump back in here.
All right, I'm going to leave some time for Q&A, so we'll be quick here in terms of lessons learned. I think one of the big ones is this idea of like this passion, vision, persistent purpose, and a deep commitment to making education better. I think like all of our guests in some shape or form bring that out. And so that it's inspirational to us. We had this episode on India a couple of weeks ago. These 2 young women who are working in these, this amazing stories about the work that they're trying to do around women's rights and education in like remote villages in India. I mean, just inspiring stories of people. Couple of things that do stand out. And again, this is not going to be a surprise to any of us who are in education, that student autonomy, self-determination, developing communities of learners and educators, and this idea of systemic innovation. So thinking about, when we are thinking about design and education, if we're thinking in terms of systems and culture, very often in EdTech, we create a project, and that's that. And it's a proof of concept. But unless and until you are making a difference to the broader systems within which these projects are embedded, it is not going to be sustainable. So, looking ahead, join us, subscribe to the channel, recommend guests to us, and extend the conversation. That's one. But we also would love if people, this is purely a voluntary thing that we've been doing for 2.5 years. I have wanted to convert this into a podcast forever. All the MP3s are there. It's just a question of time. All of us are busy, and it's hard to find the time. So if you are, or people who might love to help us with just maintaining the website, these episodes need to be tagged. We never tagged them, and so it's just harder to find stuff if you want to look for stuff. It's simple things like that, right? Which you can help. One of the things we have thought about is that there are short snippets and remixes that can be made of the videos. If that's something that you have a talent and an interest in, I will give you all the MP4 files that you want. I will send you 126 of them, or share a Dropbox with you. And if you know people who are willing to fund and support this, let us know, because this is really, it's the most fun I've had with a project in a long time, and it's just been a blast. My family knows it's Saturday. Oh, it's SLL. He's gone for the next hour and a half, and that's just it, right? And that's it. It's some work in between, getting guests and so on. But it's just been an amazing experience. And
so I got a chat coming from Furyank in the chat. He says there's a value in the chat every week, not just in the video, but participating in the chat every week is of value. The second thing he says, and I hope we are. So Priyank just said that there's value in the chat within the weekly sessions. And there's also, Gerald mentioned that there's value in the blog. So we blog on this every week and give links to this every week. And so that's really important to try and look at those blog posts that go with every episode. It's not just the video. There's the bios of everybody, all our guest bios, often their email addresses, so you can contact them. So if you find that of interest, I probably should give Chris a last say here. Chris, do you want to make a comment here?
Just one quick comment, and that is that this is also a model. The fact that the four of us could do this on zero funding, zero branding, zero support. I would love to see other teams of people who are similar but different, who have important expertise and who can invite a different range of guests and have different perspectives. There's room for a lot of similar programs, and I hope that some of you may be inspired to create them. You just can't have Saturday night from 5:30 to 6:30.
Any comments or questions here for us? Yeah, go ahead, Tristan Johnson.
So thank you guys so much for your effort. I noticed you had an email that different population. It's coming through in some of your themes. And then also, it's wonderful, it's glorious, and sometimes you trivialize how much time you're thinking, but it also knows a lot of work for you guys and gals to put it together. And so thank you very much for your effort, because it's, I see what you're doing, and I know there's a lot behind the scene that's really not being accredited. So again, I want to recognize that and thank you also for your time and effort and taking a leadership role in this kind of process.
so first, thank you for that. And I think we are all very aware of the fact that it is for guys, for men, right? For middle-aged. Some are there, some don't. Three of them do, actually. I'm the only one who doesn't. So you should watch the Nepal episode, because I wear for Halloween. But you're absolutely right. And I think that part of it is it's just a historical legacy of the fact that it was started. We never thought this would go on for 2 years, to be honest, right? And that is a blind spot that we have. I think what we have tried to do is expand the kinds of guests that we get on the show. And I'm quite proud of that fact. And I think Chris in particular, but Kurt's Rolodex, which seems infinite in depth, Yang Zhao's experience across the world, leveraging the fact that, Yang's from China and from India. So using those, I think we have done a good job that way. But you're absolutely right. This is one thing and one of the things that we've been looking at is possibly getting guests. We've talked about this, of getting guest hosts who would bring their own perspective to it, and that way sort of expand sort of the diversity of. Because, a blind spot is a blind spot, right? I mean, you don't see it because it's by definition, and that's why you need other voices in there. So absolutely agree.
In fact, Lin-Lin's been a guest host once. And, we were talking about having that as a regular thing, to have different guests or maybe have people do different shows. But yeah, it's a lot of work. The blog posts take a lot more time than the 1 hour sessions, just the booking somebody and contacting and making the arrangements and making sure everyone feels comfortable and gets the link. I mean, there's a lot. Like we're not market agents, but we're sort of acting like, there were multiple roles here, but it's fun at the same time. But you got to be committed to doing this. And fortunately, I have 3 great colleagues who one guy right here is so creative. He puts these shows together, and every show's got a different creative flair to it. So we're lucky to have Punya on this. So any final question or comment? Chris, you have a final comment? No? So Punya, we want to thank you all for attending this session, and go Silver Lining for Learning,
Yeah, I'm just sorry I'm not there to examine the alternative models of statistical reasoning.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you, everybody in the audience. Thank you all there in
Thank you.
Zoom land. Thank you all Zoom people.